In neighborhoods like Oak Ridge Hills, peace is often just a coat of fresh paint and a neatly trimmed lawn away. But behind the white picket fences and manicured driveways lies something far more dangerous than weeds or noise complaints. Power unchecked, wielded by those who mistake control for community. When Logan Hayes moved into his dream home, he thought he was escaping chaos for calm. But he didn't know that a war was already being waged. One built not with weapons, but with fines, forms, and fear. This is a story about justice, about what happens when ordinary people stand up to extraordinary abuse of power. It's about family, neighbors, and the fight to reclaim what truly makes a home. The first time Logan Pierce saw Silver Pines, it looked like a postcard from another world. Neatly trimmed lawns, kids on bikes, American flags fluttering on porches. Everything felt untouched, preserved in a bubble of calm. That's exactly why he chose it. After 20 years on the force in Los Angeles, Logan had buried his badge, buried his wife, and moved north with one goal: to build a quieter life for his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. No sirens, no crime scenes. Just land, stars, and the sound of wind through pine trees. He bought a house on the edge of the Silver Pines community, just outside the boundaries of the HOA, intentionally. He didn't want to deal with neighborhood politics or pastel-painted regulations about mailbox height and lawn fertilizer. His new home, a 2-story fixer-upper with a wide gravel driveway and a fenced backyard, had a view of the mountains and a garden patch ready for Emma to plant her sunflowers. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. And more importantly, it was theirs. For a while, it worked. Emma thrived at her new school. Logan found peace in repairing his house with his own hands. He built a tree swing. He grilled dinner on Saturdays. He started sleeping through the night again. But peace, he would learn, is fragile. It began with a note, typed, unsigned, placed neatly in his mailbox. Dear resident, please consider repainting your front door a neutral tone to align with community aesthetics. Deep red is not an approved color under the HOA design scheme. Silver Pines, HOA Compliance Committee. Logan blinked at the paper, reread it, then laughed out loud. His house wasn't in the HOA. That was the whole point. He tossed the note in the trash, thinking it was a mistake. A week later, another note arrived. Your lawn exceeds the height requirement by 1.25 inches. This is your second informal warning. This time, the letter was signed. Beverly Stanton, HOA President. Logan stared at the signature like it was a warning label on a pill bottle. He did some research. Beverly Stanton had been running the Silver Pines HOA for 9 years. Her background included event planning, neighborhood watch organization, and he wasn't kidding, 2 community beautification awards. There were whispers of her pushing families out over fence-color disputes and forcing an elderly veteran to remove his flagpole because it was slightly off-center. Logan shrugged it off. His home, as the county maps clearly showed, wasn't under Beverly's jurisdiction. Let her rage. Let her throw her notes. He had real things to worry about. Emma's science fair, the leaky upstairs faucet, the trauma he was still unraveling. But Beverly was just getting started. One morning, Logan stepped out with coffee in hand and found a strange SUV parked across the street. A woman in a tailored blazer stood beside it, camera in hand, snapping photos of his house. "Excuse me," he called. "Can I help you?" The woman turned, unsurprised. Her smile was practiced. "Just documenting violations. I'm Beverly Stanton, HOA President." Logan sipped his coffee slowly. "I'm not part of your HOA." She gave a tight laugh, as if he'd told her the sky was purple. "Silver Pines is a community, Officer Pierce. What affects one of us affects all of us." Logan's eyes narrowed. "My house is outside your jurisdiction." "Technicalities," Beverly said with a dismissive wave. "We have homeowners along the border who voluntarily opted in. I'm sure you'll come around." "I won't." Her smile vanished. "That cruiser in your driveway? It's causing concern." "It's my work vehicle. I'm a cop." Exactly, she said sharply. Some neighbors feel it sends the wrong message, fear, tension. Logan nearly laughed. It sends the message that I'm a public servant who protects this town. Beverly stepped closer, voice low. We prefer peace without reminders of crime. Police cars disrupt the visual harmony. Logan stared at her, stunned. It's a driveway, Beverly, not a damn museum. Her smile returned, frostier this time. You'll see, Mr. Pierce. Silver Pines thrives on order. You're welcome to be part of that, or... She turned to leave. You can keep resisting. Just know, we have procedures for non-compliance. Logan watched her drive away. He didn't feel angry yet, just amused. She reminded him of bureaucrats he used to deal with in the city. All form, no function. Full of self-importance, hollow inside. But that night, Emma came home from school quiet. Everything okay? He asked. She nodded too quickly. Yeah, just tired. But later, as he was tucking her in, she whispered, Dad, some girls said we don't belong here, that our house is the ugly one. His heart clenched. He smiled for her sake. That's nonsense. You know that. She nodded again, but her eyes were misty. Do we have to move again? No, he said, kissing her forehead. Not unless we want to. After she fell asleep, Logan stepped out onto the porch. The stars were out. His cruiser sat silently in the driveway. It glinted under the moonlight like a shield. This wasn't just about a mailbox, or a door color, or a lawn. This was about dignity, about protecting his home, his daughter, and the right to live without being bullied under the mask of neighborhood standards. Beverly wanted a war of paperwork. She was about to learn that Logan Pierce didn't lose. He used to chase down gang lords and armed robbers. He'd buried partners, buried his wife, but he'd be damned if he let a self-appointed HOA dictator scare his little girl. Logan stepped off the porch and looked at his property with new eyes. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a line in the sand, and Beverly Stanton had just stepped over it. It started with the sprinklers. One morning, Logan woke up to find his front yard soaked. Not just watered, but flooded. Mud pooled around the porch steps, and his morning paper was a soggy, unreadable mess. He frowned, checked the timers on his irrigation system, still set correctly. Then he noticed something odd. The sprinkler heads had been twisted, forced upward to spray the porch and the house directly. Coincidence? He doubted it. That same week, Logan noticed his trash can had been rolled into the middle of the street. 3 mornings in a row. Emma's sunflower seedlings had been pulled from the garden bed and tossed into the driveway like weeds. Someone had keyed a smiley face into the passenger side of his cruiser. Logan had been a cop long enough to recognize the pattern. Not random. Not accidental, intentional. Harassment, slow and steady. The kind that wears you down. But this wasn't his first time being targeted, and he didn't scare easy. Instead of reacting, Logan started documenting. He mounted 2 motion-activated cameras under the eaves of the house, and 1 behind the mailbox. Then he reached out to Officer Erica Hall, his former partner back in the city, and now an investigator in the county sheriff's department. You want me to investigate HOA harassment? She said over the phone. I want to be 3 steps ahead, Logan replied. I need this clean, legal, tight. If this escalates, I don't want anyone saying I retaliated. Erica chuckled. Always thinking like a detective. No, he said quietly. Thinking like a father. By the end of the week, Logan had collected his first piece of video proof. Just after midnight, a hooded figure crept up to his driveway, peeled a city code notice off a clipboard, and taped it to his cruiser's windshield. Logan zoomed in. It wasn't a city worker. It was Beverly Stanton herself, wearing gloves and a face mask. She was careful, but not careful enough. The next morning, the notice read, Police vehicle storage is prohibited overnight. Residents must use garage space for large vehicles. $100 fine due in 72 hours. Silver Pines HOA Enforcement Unit. He laughed. Enforcement unit. She made it sound like a SWAT team. He printed out the footage, sent a copy to Erica, and then called the city zoning office. I'm Officer Logan Pierce. I'd like to confirm whether Silver Pines HOA has been authorized to issue city code enforcement notices. The clerk paused. Sir, HOAs aren't authorized to issue any city notices. Didn't think so. Is this about Mrs. Stanton again? That caught his attention. You know her? She calls here weekly. We've had complaints filed about her from at least 4 other residents. She's persistent. Persistent, Logan repeated, half amused. That's one word for it. By the end of the month, Logan's folder had grown fat. Photos, footage, notes, anonymous letters, and complaints submitted to the HOA under his name, none of which he'd actually written. It all pointed to one conclusion. Beverly had gone rogue. But what worried him, more than her, was the neighborhood itself. Because Beverly wasn't acting alone anymore. One morning, as Logan walked Emma to the school bus stop, he noticed 2 women across the street whispering as they watched him. Another neighbor, Mr. Dorsey, who used to wave every morning, now turned and walked inside whenever Logan came out. Something had shifted. He could feel it. The HOA had begun distributing newsletters, every week now, filled with updates that weren't updates at all. They were thinly veiled warnings. One issue featured an editorial titled, Upholding Our Values, Why Uniformity Matters. Another asked residents to report any unauthorized vehicles or suspicious behavior. They never mentioned Logan by name, but they didn't have to. Emma came home crying one afternoon after a classmate asked if her dad was going to get kicked out for breaking the rules. Logan held her and promised her no one was kicking them out of anything. But inside, something twisted in his chest. Beverly had declared war, not with guns or lawyers, but with gossip, with pressure, with slow erosion. She wanted him isolated, pressured into leaving, pushed out of a home he'd built from scratch. Logan wasn't just facing a petty neighborhood dispute anymore. He was standing in the middle of a Cold War, quiet, calculated, and creeping closer. And like any war, it was only a matter of time before the first real strike landed. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of lazy weekend Logan used to cherish. Emma was riding her bike up and down the cul-de-sac, her laughter echoing in the warm breeze. Logan was trimming the hedge along the front of the property when he heard it. A sudden metallic clang, followed by Emma screaming. He dropped the shears and sprinted. Emma lay on the ground near the curb, tangled in her bike. Her knees were scraped and bleeding, tears welling in her eyes. But what made Logan's stomach drop was the bent front wheel, and the garden gnome smashed beside it. Not just any gnome. The HOA-issued, regulation-approved gnome, planted deliberately at the edge of the sidewalk in front of Beverly Stanton's house. Beverly stood a few feet away, arms folded, lips curled into a smirk. That'll teach her not to ride too fast. Logan's voice dropped into a deadly calm. What did you just say? I said your daughter shouldn't be riding like a maniac. My property line starts at the curb. That gnome is there to discourage recklessness. Yeah. Logan knelt beside Emma, gently lifting her bike. You planted it in the sidewalk easement. That's city property, not yours. I don't think you understand how our community works, Beverly snapped. We maintain order here, safety, structure. Logan's jaw tightened. That wasn't an accident. It wasn't vandalism either. Maybe next time she should follow the rules. A crowd had begun to gather, neighbors peeking from porches, a few walking closer, some whispering. Logan looked up and caught one woman filming with her phone. He wasn't about to lose control. That's what Beverly wanted. So he picked up Emma's bike, hoisted her gently into his arms, and turned toward the house. Logan! Beverly barked behind him. You'll be hearing from the board. That gnome cost $45. He didn't respond. Inside, he cleaned Emma's knees and held her hand as she sniffled through the pain. "Daddy," she murmured. "She did it on purpose." "I know, baby." "Why?" "Because she thinks she can push us out." Emma looked at him with wide, glassy eyes. "Are we leaving?" Logan paused, holding her gaze. Then he smiled softly and shook his head. "No, we're not going anywhere." He kissed her forehead, but deep inside, something had shifted. That gnome hadn't just injured Emma. It had crossed a line. Later that night, Logan reviewed the security footage. Sure enough, earlier that morning, Beverly had walked out with a hammer and stake, planting the gnome precisely 4 inches into the easement. He zoomed in on her face. There was no mistaking the satisfaction. He sent the video to Officer Erica Hall with a short note. "Intentional obstruction, endangering a minor. I want this documented." Within an hour, she replied, "Already working on it. Filing a formal report with Child Endangerment Services. You'll get a call soon." Logan didn't stop there. He filed a city maintenance request, citing illegal use of city land. He submitted video footage. He even included stills from Beverly's social media account, a photo she'd proudly uploaded of her gnome army standing guard for the HOA. The next morning, 2 city workers arrived. With tape measures in hand and official clipboards tucked under their arms, they examined the area. Beverly burst from her house in a silk robe and slippers. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" One of the workers replied blandly, "Ma'am, this is public property. We're responding to a citizen report regarding an obstruction in the pedestrian pathway. I'm the HOA president." "Doesn't override city code," the man said, lifting the gnome with a gloved hand and placing it gently into a bag marked seized property. Logan watched from his porch. No smile, just calm. Beverly turned to him, eyes burning. "You think this is over?" "No," he said. "I think it's finally beginning." That evening, a letter arrived. Anonymous, typed, unsigned. "Your daughter is a menace. If she gets hurt again, you'll only have yourself to blame." Logan stared at the words, pulse thudding in his ears. This wasn't harassment anymore. It was a threat. He scanned the note and emailed it to Erica. "I want surveillance increased, and I want a restraining order against Stanton, for both me and Emma." Erica replied, "On it. And Logan, be careful. She's losing control. That's when people do dangerous things." Logan stared out the window at the quiet cul-de-sac. The sun was setting, and the neighborhood looked as perfect as ever. But he knew better now. This place didn't need fences or signs to trap you. It had something far worse. A community that turned on its own. And one woman who believed that power, no matter how petty, was hers to wield without consequence. But she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because Logan wasn't going to take it anymore. He wasn't going to wait for the HOA to break another rule. He was going to dismantle it. One bylaw, one lie, one lawsuit at a time, and he was going to start tonight. Logan hadn't always been a fighter, not in the legal sense anyway. But the day he held that anonymous threat in his hand, something clicked. This wasn't just about his daughter's safety anymore. It was about power. Who had it? Who abused it? And how to take it back. By Monday morning, Logan had a plan. And it started with paperwork. He walked into City Hall with 2 things. A binder filled with HOA infractions, and a flash drive of video evidence dating back to the week he moved in. On it were Beverly harassing him on his own porch. The gnome placement, minutes before Emma's injury. Multiple neighbors being fined for violations that didn't match city ordinances. Surveillance footage of Karen Myers, a member of the HOA board, pouring paint in a neighbor's flower bed. Logan had caught her on accident. But now it was leverage. At the clerk's office, he filed a formal complaint requesting a municipal review of the HOA's legality, citing misuse of power, harassment, and unlawful enforcement. The clerk, a sharp-eyed woman named Denise, raised an eyebrow. "You're serious about this?" Logan nodded. I'm a father. They came after my kid. I'm as serious as it gets. She leaned closer. You're not the first complaint we've gotten, but you're the first with real evidence. By the afternoon, Logan was back home, seated at his kitchen table with Officer Erica Hall and a local attorney, Marcia Lowell, who'd reached out after hearing about the gnome incident through community whisper networks. Marcia specializes in HOA abuse cases, Erica explained, and she's got a reputation for making bullies pay. Marcia smiled thinly. I've sued 8 HOAs in the last 3 years. 5 of them no longer exist. Logan arched a brow. Then I came to the right place. Marcia reviewed his evidence and chuckled. Oh, they're sloppy. Petty tyrants always are. Look at this fine. She pointed to a scanned notice. They charged you for visual disharmony because your mailbox has a silver handle. HOA bylaws don't list handle material under violations. That's illegal. She flipped through more. Here, unauthorized lawn furniture? You mean the bench your daughter sits on while waiting for the school bus? Absurd. Erica added, and don't forget the gnome. That incident qualifies as reckless endangerment and civil negligence. We're opening a formal investigation with the DA's office. Logan exhaled slowly. What happens next? Marcia sat forward. We start the war they picked, but we fight smart. First, we send a cease and desist to the HOA demanding they halt all enforcement actions pending legal review. Then, we submit a motion for a temporary injunction to freeze their authority over you and any other homeowners who want out. Erica nodded. Meanwhile, I've flagged your address with local patrol. Any harassment, and they'll be there within minutes. Later that night, Logan met quietly with 3 other neighbors. Travis, a retired vet whose American flag had been labeled too aggressive. Beth, a single mother fined for sidewalk chalk. And Jorge, whose garden was deemed a visual disturbance. They were angry. More than angry. They were fed up. I thought it was just me, Travis said, fists clenched. No, Logan replied. It's all of us, and we're going to do something about it. He shared his legal plan, and by the end of the meeting, all 3 had agreed to join a class action suit. Beth laughed through tears. Finally, someone standing up to them. The following morning, Beverly received her first cease and desist letter. She opened it, scanned the bold headline, and immediately stormed into the HOA clubhouse. Karen Myers was already there, sipping tea. What's wrong now? Beverly slammed the letter down. Carter lawyered up. He's suing the board. And he has evidence. Karen's face darkened. We need to crush this. Beverly leaned in. He's building an army. Travis, Beth, even Jorge. If this gets momentum, we're finished. Karen's eyes narrowed. Then we discredit him. Quietly. Publicly. Whatever it takes. That week, Logan received 3 fake reviews on his business's Facebook page, accusing him of unethical repairs and poor workmanship. Medicine. Then, a city health inspector arrived at his door for a surprise check of his non-existent home catering business. He laughed bitterly. They're trying to smear me. But what they didn't realize was that Logan had anticipated every move. He installed more cameras, logged every strange visit, documented every online smear with timestamps. When Marcia returned, she brought news. Your injunction hearing is scheduled for next week. And the judge? She smirked. She's had her own issues with HOAs. Logan grinned. Then it's game on. The night before the hearing, Logan tucked Emma into bed. Daddy, she whispered, are they still mad at us? He kissed her forehead. They're losing control, baby. And when people like that lose control, they get loud. But loud doesn't mean right. She smiled sleepily. Are we winning? Logan looked out the window, toward the clubhouse where shadows moved behind blinds. We're just getting started. The hearing took place on a cold, gray Tuesday morning inside a small county courthouse, tucked between the DMV and an aging diner. From the outside, it looked forgettable. But inside, something that had simmered for years in Oak Ridge Hills was finally about to boil over. Logan arrived early, with Marcia and Officer Hall at his side. Behind him were Travis, Beth, Jorge, and nearly a dozen other residents who had quietly joined the class action complaint after hearing whispers of what Logan was doing. The courtroom buzzed with tension. On the other side sat the HOA's legal team, two suits from a firm paid for by resident dues, and of course, Beverly Shaw and Karen Myers, seated front and center, dressed like they were attending a royal banquet rather than a civil hearing. When the judge entered, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes named Judge Elaine Monroe, the room stilled. She took her seat, looked over the docket, and adjusted her glasses. Carter v. Oak Ridge Hills HOA. This is a hearing on a motion for injunction and preliminary review of unlawful enforcement. Counsel, proceed. Marcia stood, calm, poised, deadly. Your Honor, what began as minor violations quickly escalated into targeted harassment, unlawful enforcement of pseudo-legal authority, and physical endangerment of a minor. The HOA has acted beyond its scope, enforcing fabricated rules, forging citations, and retaliating against residents who speak up. She passed a folder to the clerk. Inside are notarized statements, photographic evidence, and documented abuses. Judge Monroe flipped through a few pages. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Is it true the HOA attempted to tow a marked police vehicle from Mr. Carter's property? The HOA's lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, the board acted within its authority to preserve neighborhood standards. Marcia didn't even look up from her folder. By committing attempted theft of government property? That's a felony. There was a beat of silence. Karen whispered something to Beverly, who turned red but stayed silent. Then, Marcia hit play on a short video clip, a speakerphone recording of Karen's voice, instructing the tow truck driver to, "Just take it. He can cry about it later." The courtroom gasped. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Strike that from the record, the HOA's lawyer snapped. Denied, Judge Monroe replied sharply. This stays. Then Logan stepped forward. May I address the court? The judge nodded. Briefly. Logan stood behind the podium, his voice steady but firm. Your Honor, I moved to Oak Ridge Hills for peace. What I found was intimidation, threats, and people using power they never legally had. They hurt my daughter with their games. They targeted me and others with made-up rules. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for protection. And for this to stop. He looked at Karen and Beverly. This isn't about mailboxes or lawn decorations. It's about control. And enough is enough. When he stepped down, the judge leaned back in her chair, silent for a moment. Then she spoke. I've seen a lot of HOA disputes in my time, but I've rarely seen one with this level of manipulation, falsified complaints, and retaliatory behavior. At minimum, this HOA board has overstepped its legal bounds. At worst, this borders on organized misconduct. Karen opened her mouth to object, but the judge cut her off with a raised hand. I am granting a temporary injunction against the Oak Ridge Hills HOA board. All enforcement actions are suspended, effective immediately, pending further investigation. Mr. Carter and any named plaintiffs are exempt from HOA governance until a full hearing. The gavel slammed once. The courtroom erupted into murmurs. It wasn't a full win, not yet. But it was more than anyone had ever gotten before. As people filtered out of the room, Logan's neighbors stopped to shake his hand. Some smiled. Some nodded quietly, gratitude in their eyes. The community was waking up. But the victory was short-lived. Outside the courthouse, Beverly was already on the phone, her voice shrill and furious. No, I don't care what the judge said. We'll call a private emergency meeting. Get legal counsel. We're not done. Karen crossed her arms, eyes locked on Logan like a hawk. He's embarrassed us. We hit back. Logan caught the look. He turned to Marcia. They're not going down easy, are they? Marcia gave a tight smile. Power never does. That evening, Logan hosted a quiet gathering at his home. Travis brought beer. Beth made chili. Jorge handed out copies of the court decision. The group had grown. Now, nearly 20 residents filled Logan's backyard, each with their own HOA horror story. For the first time, they saw each other not just as neighbors, but as allies. Marcia stood to speak. They'll retaliate, count on it. But we now have a case. The injunction gives us leverage. And the more people join, the harder it becomes for them to hide behind procedure. Erica added, and if you're threatened or fined, report it. I'm working with Internal Affairs and the DA's office. We're watching. That night, Logan stood on his porch, Emma curled up next to him in a blanket. The air was quiet. The street, for once, peaceful. Did you win, Daddy? She asked sleepily. He didn't answer right away. No, sweetheart. But today, we made them afraid of losing. She smiled. Good. And as Logan watched the porch lights flicker on across the block, one by one, he realized something. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a movement. And it had just found its voice. The sun rose slowly over Oak Ridge Hills. But for once, the morning felt different. Logan stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his collar. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet intensity. Today was the final hearing, the one that would determine whether the HOA would be stripped of its legal authority, and whether Karen Myers and Beverly Shaw would be held accountable for everything they had done. He looked down at a small photo of Emma taped to the inside of his wallet. Her gap-toothed smile gave him courage. This wasn't just about rules or retaliation. It was about protecting something sacred, home. At the courthouse, the crowd was bigger than expected. Reporters lined the steps, camera crews jostling for position. Word had spread far beyond the neighborhood. Residents from nearby towns had shown up in solidarity. A sign even waved from the crowd. HOA God. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with energy. The judge entered, this time with 2 clerks and a full panel of county officials seated to the side. A clear sign that this wasn't just a local issue anymore. Judge Monroe wasted no time. We are here today to determine the future of the Oak Ridge Hills HOA and to investigate charges of abuse of power, financial fraud, and unlawful enforcement. She turned to Marcia. You may proceed. Marcia stood slowly, the weight of months of preparation carried in her voice. Your Honor, this is no longer about neighborhood aesthetics. It's about a system designed to protect communities being hijacked by personal agendas, ego, and greed. She walked to the center of the room and tapped a binder. We've presented financial audits showing misused HOA funds, witness testimonies from over 30 residents, and proof of forged violations, retaliatory tactics, and one attempted theft of a police vehicle. The room stirred. Karen visibly stiffened in her seat. But most damning of all, Marcia continued, flipping to a final page, we have email records linking Beverly Shaw and Karen Myers to a private development deal. Their plan was simple. Weaponize HOA authority to harass residents, seize non-HOA properties by claiming legal jurisdiction, and flip them for profit under the guise of beautification projects. She looked directly at the board. They weren't enforcing community standards. They were laying groundwork for real estate fraud. The air went still. Then the judge nodded. Defense? The HOA's attorney stood. Your Honor, the board members acted in what they believed were the best interests of the community. If there were missteps, the judge cut in. I have written evidence of board members issuing violations for visible tire marks on asphalt and unharmonious shrubbery. That's not governance. That's absurdity. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is a witch hunt. Everything we did was to protect property values. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Monroe's gavel slammed. Silence. Then, in a quiet, even voice, She delivered the blow. This court finds that the Oak Ridge Hills HOA board, under the leadership of Karen Myers and Beverly Shaw, grossly abused its authority, violated state HOA governance laws, and engaged in actions that rise to the level of civil misconduct and financial exploitation. Karen's face turned ghost white. Beverly looked down, defeated. I hereby order the dissolution of the current HOA board. A court-appointed mediator will oversee all neighborhood affairs until a legal election is held. Furthermore, both Karen Myers and Beverly Shaw are subject to civil liability for misappropriated funds and retaliatory conduct. Gasp, murmurs, applause. But the judge wasn't finished. And finally, I am forwarding the evidence provided to the district attorney's office for criminal review. Let the system decide whether felony charges are warranted. It was over. Karen whispered something under her breath, eyes unfocused. Beverly clutched her purse and bolted from the room, chased by reporters. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence as the reality of their collapse settled in. Logan remained still. Only when Judge Monroe glanced at him and offered a small nod did he let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. As people filed out, Officer Hall clapped a hand on Logan's back. You just made history, man. Most people talk about standing up. You actually did it. Later that evening, the streets of Oak Ridge Hills lit up, not with sirens or HOA patrols, but with porch lights and quiet celebrations. Residents gathered on front lawns, sharing food and stories. For the first time in years, laughter wasn't laced with caution. Marcia handed Logan a copy of the court's final decision. This, she said, was because of you. Because you didn't back down. Logan looked around at the neighbors, now friends who had stood with him. I didn't win this alone. We all did. And then, Emma ran up, gripping a sign she'd made herself. No more HOA meanies. Everyone laughed. The nightmare was over. But more importantly, something better had taken root. Real community.